Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for Lunch Break. I'm Carrie. Today we're talking with artist Scott McIntire. Scott is an artist based in Long Island, and he makes the invisible visible in his paintings that visualize energy fields that surround natural and man-made objects. His colorful, dynamic paintings comment on climate change and the human impact on the environment. He was in SciArt's exhibit back in 2015 called UnNatural Nature. Thank you so much for being with us, Scott. For participants, if you have questions you'd like to ask Scott throughout this talk, you can type them into the Q&A box on Zoom and we'll get to those at the end. To start off, can you tell us about the mediums you use and what you focus on?
Sure. Now I'm going to switch over to screen share to give you an idea of what I did before I started getting involved with the SciArt as a interest in my work and a movement to start following. So I'm going to start off with a early piece from 2006. And the history behind this piece is previous to that, I was doing basically photorealism. And I was tired of doing that. I wanted to put more information into my paintings. And I had said to myself at this time, I'm going to just put all of my background, which was advertising design, fine art, fabric design. I have an extensive background in doing commercial work, but while I've always done commercial work, I've been showing at the same time in fine art galleries. So this one was sort of my initial piece that said, to hell with it, I'm going to do exactly what I want to do, bring in all my past work and experiment that way. Okay, now it's getting this to shift. So this is one of the first paintings I did when I started this direction. And this was a windmill in watermill. And the idea behind it was I couldn't do a windmill without thinking about Don Quixote. And when I'm thinking about Don Quixote, I was putting him in the lower right on the motorcycle, and Pancho Sanchez is on little Vespa. You can barely see it to the left above the squares. But then I started thinking about the psychosis that he was going through. And I wanted to make reference to that psychosis. And that's what started me off on these spinning ovals and circles and laying that kind of information, overlapping it on top of the windmill, on top of him. And that's what made me start thinking about energy fields. One of the first pieces. One of the second pieces I did, 2010, considering global warming. I had done the painting, all of the blues, the stingray, the Chrysler building, the stripes and everything. And I felt it needed more. I felt that it needed something that brought in some more tension and action to it. And that's when I added the circles. This is a little more quiet one. This is up in Massachusetts, friend's backyard. They're on a lake. I got up early morning, looking at the silhouettes, looking at the sky and everything, and thinking, God, it'd be great to see the aurora borealis. And so that's how this one came about. Again, it's thinking about another kind of energy going on in the sky. Now, this is one of the first paintings where I really started thinking about the environment that surrounds me. I live on the very end of Long Island on the North Shore in an area called Greenport. And it's a very rich area with farmlands, and driving around, I would see these sumac growing in the fall and wanted to put together a painting on that. And I also wanted to reference the energy that was going on around this, meaning radio waves from cellular transmissions and television, things like that. I put in a cellular tower. It's kind of subtle in the back behind the sumacs. And then on each side panel, I put in telephone poles as another way of referencing that. This is an early piece. called Fear of Fracking. And, you know, living on Long Island, we don't have fracking because the water table is so shallow, but I still wanted to make a statement about the potential of what happens when you start messing with the water table and putting in all these chemicals and start exploding things to bring out the oil and gas. And I did a book in 2013 called My Backyard Project. This is my backyard, looks more larger than it actually is. I'm on a 1/4 acre of property, and I am an extensive gardener, as you can see. I got interested while I was out in the garden with all of the sights and the sounds that I was hearing, and I wanted to start photographically recording all of the mammals, the birds, and the insects in my yard. And this is what started me off and got me connected with the SciArt movement, or more into bi-art possibly. But it was a real eye-opener in terms of a project, because I had no idea what I was going to come up with and what I would find. And I did this, it's just what I recorded in 1 year. And it was like 7 mammals, including the neighbor dog and cat. And the neighbor dog and cat are important simply because they eat the rabbits, they eat the birds. The dogs don't, but the cats do. Of course, I've got deer. I never shot a raccoon photographically, but they're back there also. Anyhow, this was a real eye-opener, and it led to, you know, here's one of the photographs of the rabbit in the backyard. And that in turn led to this painting that I did in 2017. Another statement on fracking, but it's also, you know, it brings in a very early background of mine, a whole nother lifetime away of doing op art painting, and really seeing what I could pull out in terms of energy symbols, energy signatures, I call them. And it opened me up to this whole new direction of work that I've been working in now for a good 10 years. Is another example of what I find in the backyard. This locust borer beetle happens to be here because I have locust trees outside of my property. I only saw this bug once. I take my camera with me when I'm out gardening, and I shot that. And then the daylily is one of the flowers from my yard. So I'm going to show you a few pieces from this series. A morning glory and this long-legged fly, which is a beautiful fly when the sun hits it. It's just all metallic and rainbow colors. Now, I'll talk a little bit of, well, I'm going to go into another one where I'll talk more. This one I always like to tell people, you know, this is like when you're working in the backyard and everything's nice and quiet, and then all of a sudden the neighbor starts up their leaf blower. So I'm playing with not just radio waves that go on, but with sounds and smells and all sorts of unseen things that I sense in the environment. I either hear them, I smell them, or I just know that they're behind us. I know about all, you know, because I'm out in the garden, the cell phone rings. I mean, that transmission is coming through the air along with God knows how many other radio waves that are going on. The color bar that you see up at the top on this piece is my way of bringing back reference that color is also a subject in my paintings. My paintings start out, this one started out in red, and I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't start with a predetermined idea. I did know I wanted to paint this black tulip because it's such a gorgeous tulip. And then I found a black mason wasp, and I put that together, so I'm playing with black and red as a color. And then to bring in the sound pattern that I've got, you know, I wanted to get into some secondary colors of the purples and the greens. And a lot of my work, it starts, again, with the background colors, and then I bring in objects that I want to reference that I find in the yard. Now, this butterfly that I had was not that interesting a butterfly but I'd been looking at a lot of imagery online of magnetic fields that go on when people are doing these incredible micro photography, documentations of things that they see. And I wanted to put that in, and that's how this particular painting evolved. And they evolved by me putting in a mark like the butterfly, and then I wanted to react to that, and I put in a circle behind it, and I wanted to add some more circles, and I put in the lines. It's a process of growing. It's more like abstract painting than it is photorealism, where you start with one image and you work from one corner to the next and it's done. This one, I find images, I put it in, and then I react to that image with the next group of marks that I do and slowly build the painting up. This is a very recent one. Again, pulling subjects from my backyard and then playing with various types of energy signal. Above the cardinal is not the voice signature of the cardinal, or of the blue jay. It's the voice signature of a cardinal, which is always around in the backyard as well as the blue jays. Now, I paint, just to fill that in, my paint is enamel paint. It's a sign painting paint, or designed as a sign painting paint. I used to do it in thinner based paints, but now I've switched over to water based paints, and I use it for the color depth that it gives me. It's like painting with acrylic paint, except it's glossy. Dries very fast, hard to manipulate, but it gives me the type of color saturation that I'm after. I'm going to switch back off of this now, or we can continue on with the second question that you've got, and then I'll keep going with the slides.
Yeah, thank you. So what have you been working on more recently?
Well, again, this is one of the more recent pieces. Let's see. This is a detail of another piece. I put this detail in to show you some of the close-ups of the energy statements I'm trying to make. The voice print that you can see there is a voice print again of a cardinal. And I like to play with these concentric circles, and I think of them as sound waves, but not as the typical sound waves that go up and down. But if you turn those up and down sound waves on their end and they're coming at you, that's how I've evolved thinking about these concentric circles. And just to fill in people how these concentric circles are done, they're just done with a plain old compass. But I happen to have a compass that does a 40-inch circle. And it's loading the paint into a compass. If anybody is not familiar with it, it's two pieces of metal that you can make close together. They're pointed metal, and you can make it closer together or further apart, and you put the paint in the middle, and it will come out the tip of that, and you slowly make a line with it. I also got interested in the concept of neutrinos. That's what these lines are that are going through the canvas. And for the science people here that know what neutrinos are, for the other ones who don't know, they're subatomic particles that travel through everything, us, the earth, trees, sky. And down in the bottom, there's an oval with dots, and I think of those as smells that happen, or groups of small insects or small things that tend to group together, and they're just a grouping. That's how I kind of think of those images. This one obviously is a very sky-oriented piece, and it's half of this piece, which has the cardinal in it. And just to give you a reference for the size on this is 24 by 72, I believe. And it's one of my more current pieces. I've also been playing with this rainbow, that you see the rainbow image in the center of this. I started thinking about the rainbow as all color equaling all information. And I've got to cut that off. Sorry, I had a phone call in the middle of this. And I started playing more with this rainbow idea. You can see it in the center of this panel again, thinking about the cloud as a storage unit that stores all of our information. Again, all color, all information. Now, these are two things that came out of my backyard. The skull was actually buried in my backyard. And thanks to the SciArt community, I didn't know what kind of skull this was. So I put that out online and got a whole bunch of answers and found out it's a dog skull. Some thought it was a fox, a coyote, but it's actually a dog skull by the structure of it. The tulip, I wanted to play with it because it's sort of like an egg shape. So I'm thinking of life and death and the space in between on this particular piece. I'll go to the next one. This is another series of work. It's still involved with my interest of stuff that goes on in the backyard, but it's also a way for me to get to be slightly more abstract with my work. This vine is called Bittersweet, and it's a vine that grows up trees and reaches out and comes back, and it's reaching for new limbs to grab a hold of them. It works its way all the way up to the top of the tree and actually chokes out the tree and eventually kills trees if it gets too thick. But I love the line quality of it. And so I did a whole series of Bittersweet. So I'll show you some of the series of those pieces. These are 3 pieces that we're in a show at Nassau County Museum in 2018, having a nice conversation at the end with an Ellsworth Kelly print. And it's just playing with that line quality of it. It's got energy signatures going on in the background. I finished the first piece on this and felt it needed something more and started putting in the primary color squares and rectangles. And then it ended up leading to this series of 3, which, it allows me just to play with going different directions on these pieces and not knowing exactly where I'm going to go. Once I start on a piece, it's interesting to see where they finally end up. A large example of one of the pieces. And in this piece, if you look above the yellow bar, you can subtly see there's a little mayfly that's hanging off of the Bittersweet. Each one of these pieces does have an insect or 2 in them. This is a show I had last fall at Nassau County Museum again, a show on energy fields. And the show was a result of working with a curator, Charles Riley. He had written a couple of my catalogs on the energy fields that I was playing with, that whole concept. And it led into this large show, which put me in with the best company I've ever been in with. This is a James Rosenquist painting on the far wall with a clock, and then my what's called Energy Field 2 or Energy Field 1 painting, which is this painting, which has the wrong title on it. I just noticed. It happens when I do this stuff in a hurry for this presentation. Anyhow, this one is really a current piece and part of my current thinking. Again, it's got that rainbow, i.e. cloud connection going through the whole piece. It's thinking about cellular transmissions that come from these towers, and it's thinking about the energy that's gained from this flower that's in the backyard. And these, by the way, are not bees, but they're called Wasp Mimics. They mimic the look of bees, but they're actually from the wasp family. And the concentric circle, again, just really hitting home about the fact that we're surrounded by energy all the time. This is you asked about current shows and everything. This is a show that was up for 1 week, and then the controvirus hit and the gallery closed. Show's still up, but nobody can see it. This is a recent series of the Bittersweet pieces, playing with Bittersweet juxtaposed against rectangles and squares, and subtle energy signatures going on in the background of these pieces. another combination of paintings from this show. This show allowed me to deal with my bio art paintings from the backyard, which is a series of paintings, and then the Bittersweet is another series of paintings. It allowed me to put both of these series on it. It just drives me crazy that nobody can see this show because it's a huge show for me. It's got 30-some pieces in it. This is my current work. I decided I'm going to just face right head on into climate change and start talking about the issues that I'm concerned about with climate change. This was the first painting, the last iceberg. And the obvious, I mean, you know, they're melting like crazy, and one of these days we're going to hit the last one. This is the second in the series called Not a Hoax, dealing with the fact that, you know, we're one major storm away from flooding Manhattan again. While I'm doing these paintings, I also play around with works on paper. And these allow me to just be more experimental and gamble and get new ideas. This is a collage. The pieces at the bottom of this with the blue around it and the bottom edge are all collage pieces. The Bittersweet is painted, and the Sphinx moth is painted. And this is a beautiful moth that I found in the backyard. It's probably got about a 3.5-inch wingspan. Anyhow, that's a very current piece. This is another one, looking for subject matter in the winter. I'm walking up my driveway and saw these seeds pods, and, you know, cut them down, brought them into the studio, and did a winter scene. And then while I'm doing it, on the third one in, you can see this beetle that's there. And that was in my bathroom while I was working on this project. He had somehow snuck his way into the house, so I wanted to put him in the painting also. So that's the end of that presentation for me. These are how I can be reached if anybody's interested. My website, my Instagram account, and Facebook. I don't do much with Twitter anymore. I find it not that helpful for me. So I'm going to get off of this and go back to a screen share.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think especially your finding inspiration in the backyard feels very relevant right now.
It's an amazing project because it keeps evolving. You know, I put together a book on it, like I said, back in 2013, and I'm still documenting new critters that are coming in. Not much on mammals, but a few new birds, but the insects, just insane. How many insects and varieties that are out there.
Yeah. So I think that Julia's jumping in now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here. This is Julia from SciArt into voice some questions from the audience. So speaking about your backyard project, one question is, what is the most kind of surprising moment you had, or surprising thing that happened or has happened since you published your book in your backyard, in terms of things you've discovered or new species that weren't known to you, or you know, things along that line?
Yeah, again, the insects were a total surprise. I had no idea, and I can't even come close to recording what I see. I haven't even really looked into ants yet. I've got so many ants, different varieties of ants, and I don't know anything about them. I'm not a biologist, so I have to go through books and different sources. Google Images is a good source to identify all of these things. The most surprising one was that Sphinx moss that I showed you the work on paper of, because I was watering the backyard. I've got these things called hostas, this plant that has big leaves, and I'm watering it, and this moth flies out and shakes his wings off because he sleeps during the day, and I picked him up, and it's just an amazing insect. And he stayed on my hand for a couple of minutes and then flew off, and I got my camera and got lots of nice, great shots of it. So you get surprises like that. You get surprised. I'm in the backyard and I'm hearing all this chatter from crows, And I look up in the sky and there's like 6 or 7 crows chasing a red-tailed hawk. And
Wow.
fortunately, I was able to get the camera in focus quick enough and got a shot of it. So you never
Wow.
know what's going to be there. And you know, it's been a continuing project. Like I say, I do lectures on it now and keep moving forward on it and see where it lands.
That's so interesting. Yeah, certainly there's always some sort of small drama going on in nature that we're
Yep.
just not a part of, but can be witness to. Another question from the audience. The question is, having the geometric representations of energy in the background of otherwise peaceful subjects invokes or can invoke a kind of looming astronomic doomsday to me. Is that intentional or a side effect of these representations?
I think it's a side effect. I don't see it as a doomsday thing. I just see it as recognizing that this stuff goes on behind us. I don't know what it's going to do to us. You know, I
Yeah.
don't know. You know, there's a lot of stuff about G5 being bad to be around for a cellular network. I don't know the background on that, so I don't know if that's a bad thing, as bad as some people are concerned or not. Obviously, it'd be great to not have all these energy things going on around us, but they're here, and I just want to point it out and have been doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It makes you think about all the things we can't see, right?
Yeah.
Well, that is about all the time that we have for questions. So I want to thank you, Scott, for being here with us, and let Carrie wrap it up.
Okay. Thank you, Julia.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for everyone who tuned in today. Thanks for your questions. If you missed part of this talk, we'll be posting it on YouTube and you can watch it there. And our next lunch break will be Wednesday, the 29th with Catherine Jo Yarrington. And you can join our mailing list at sciartinitiative.org to stay up to date on what we're doing next. Thank you again. Thank you,
Great.
Scott.
Thank you. Bye-bye.